Picture this. It's late 1944. A group of German women, exhausted, terrified, captured behind enemy lines. They've been told the Americans are monsters, that cruelty and starvation await them. They believe it. Every part of them is braced for the worst. But what happens next isn't just surprising. It's a story that redefines humanity itself, even in the darkest days of war. The trucks, groaning under their heavy loads, finally rolled to a stop just after sunset in the biting cold of early winter 1944. Inside them, a group of German women huddled together, shivering. They were clerks, communication auxiliaries, medics, and other non-combatants, caught in the desperate, chaotic retreat across France as the Allied forces pushed eastward. For days they had been marched, shuffled, and transferred between temporary holding pens, their uniforms caked with mud, their bodies screaming from exhaustion, and their stomachs empty. They stepped down slowly, each movement a painful effort, their faces pale and etched with profound uncertainty. American soldiers stood waiting. Their silhouettes loomed large in the deepening gloom, big helmets and heavy coats making them seem even more imposing. Their rifles were slung low, their faces impassive, watching the women with the cautious professionalism drilled into them since basic training. Every detail matched the terrifying warnings their own officers had fed them for months. Expect cruelty. Expect shouting. Expect nothing but the savage vengeance of the enemy. The women braced themselves, every nerve ending screaming. One American private stepped forward. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. His voice was calm, clear, cutting through the frosty air. "You are safe now. Come follow us." The women exchanged confused glances, their fear momentarily overshadowed by sheer bewilderment. This was not the captivity they had been promised. They were led toward a long, low wooden building, the processing hall of a temporary prisoner of war camp. Inside, under the flickering, smoky light of kerosene lamps, something truly unexpected began to unfold. As the women formed a hesitant line, an American sergeant moved down the row, his clipboard in hand, checking tags, documents, and names. The silence was thick, punctuated only by the rustle of papers and the low murmur of instructions. That's when one woman, her frame barely upright, leaned forward. Her voice was a mere whisper, so quiet the sergeant almost missed it. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't an accusation. It was the raw, fragile sound of someone holding onto their last shred of strength. "We ate nothing for a week." The sergeant froze. He looked at her, truly seeing the hollows beneath her eyes, the tremble in her hands. Other American personnel nearby looked at one another, a silent, urgent communication passing between them. Nobody spoke a word, but they all understood the devastating truth. These women, whatever their nationality, whatever the war, were not a threat in that moment. They were simply starving. The sergeant's jaw tightened. "Get the cooks," he muttered, his voice barely audible but filled with an undeniable resolve. Less than 2 minutes later, a young corporal was sprinting across the icy ground toward the mess hall. American policy, meticulously documented by the U.S. War Department and upheld by the Geneva Convention, required all prisoners of war, including women, to receive proper rations immediately upon capture. But following regulations was one thing. Witnessing true, bone-deep starvation firsthand was something else entirely. Inside the bustling kitchen, huge pots were already boiling, preparing the evening meal for the American troops. When the corporal burst through the doors, breathless, and explained the dire situation, the cooks didn't hesitate for a second. "Load the trays now," one of them commanded, his voice firm. "They eat first." They moved with practiced urgency, slapping together what they had ready. Warm, flaky biscuits, generously slathered with rich, thick gravy made from meat drippings. Steaming piles of potatoes, hearty boiled vegetables, fresh cornbread, and cup after cup of hot, invigorating coffee. It was an improvised feast, perhaps a simple meal, certainly not one of luxury. But to the German women, it would become a life-saving banquet. When the women were finally led into the brightly lit mess hall, they stopped, a collective gasp of disbelief escaping their lips. Warm air enveloped them, chasing away the gnawing chill. The heavenly scent of real cooked food filled their nostrils. They heard the clatter of metal trays, the murmur of busy cooks, and saw steam rising invitingly from huge pots. Tears welled in the eyes of some of the women, not because the food was extravagant, but because it simply existed. A kind-faced cook gently placed the very first tray into the trembling hands of the woman who had whispered those 4 pivotal words. She stared at the plate, her eyes wide, as if afraid it might suddenly vanish. Then, her voice soft with wonder, she asked, "This is for us?" The cook, a gruff but gentle man, simply nodded. "You eat. No one is taking it from you." What happened next remained etched in the memories of the American guards for the rest of their lives. The German women didn't fall upon the food like ravenous animals. They didn't devour it in a frenzy. Instead, they carefully sat down. They straightened their mud-stained uniforms. And they ate slowly, deliberately, with a quiet dignity that belied the desperation visible in every single bite. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, warmth spread through their bodies, a physical and emotional thaw. The shift in perception had begun. After the meal, American medics carefully examined them. They confirmed severe dehydration, exposure, and significant malnourishment. The women, still trapped by the old paradigm of fear and punishment, half expected to be chastised for their weakness. Instead, they were tenderly wrapped in thick woolen blankets and guided to clean, warm places to rest. One American nurse, years later, vividly recalled that moment. "These were not soldiers in that moment," she said. "They were just young women who needed help." Simple as that. In the barracks, a pot-bellied stove glowed a comforting red, radiating heat. The German women warmed their hands and feet, speaking in low, hushed voices, still processing the profound unlikeliness of what had just occurred. Nothing in their rigorous military training, nothing in the propaganda they had been fed, had prepared them for such an act of kindness from the enemy. Over the next few days, the women settled into the routines of a temporary prisoner of war camp. There were roll calls, work details, and the eventual checks for mail. But what they remembered most, what truly broke through the psychological barriers of war, wasn't the discipline or the structure. It was that first night. The profound warmth of the mess hall. The miraculous hot food. The moment their deep-seated fear of Americans began to finally break. Years later, back in Germany, when some of these women were interviewed, they all recalled one thing with crystal clarity. The Americans fed us like their own. It wasn't propaganda. It wasn't an exaggeration. It was simply the unvarnished truth of what happened. The cooks who ladled gravy onto their plates that frigid night never saw them again after the war. But those few precious hours inside that humble wooden mess hall became a cherished memory carried across a lifetime. A powerful, undeniable moment when humanity briefly outweighed hatred. A pivotal moment when 4 whispered words changed absolutely everything. This is a true World War II story, a testament that sometimes humanity itself can be a stronger weapon than conventional arms in a war. Do you agree? Let us know in the comments. And be sure to follow us for more true World War II stories that reveal the extraordinary moments hidden within history.